Welcome back to The Silent Truth, the place where real stories uncover the things people often keep hidden. If you enjoy stories about family, love, betrayal, and redemption, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you don't miss the next silent truth waiting to be told. Now, let's dive into today's story. I never thought I'd find myself at the center of a family drama that would split a wedding wide open, but life has a funny way of revealing people's true colors. My name is Margaret, and I'm 62 years old. I have one son, Daniel, my pride and joy. He's kind, hardworking, and honestly one of the best men I know. Daniel met his fiancée, Melissa, about 2 years ago. She was smart, beautiful, and very put together. From the moment I met her, she made a strong impression. She was confident, maybe a little too confident, and had this way of speaking that always seemed rehearsed. Still, I wanted to like her. Daniel was clearly smitten. He told me she was the one, and all I wanted was for my son to be happy. But as the wedding plans started to unfold, little red flags began to pop up. Melissa was particular about everything. The color scheme had to be timeless. The food had to be elevated. The venue had to be classy and exclusive. Every time Daniel mentioned something simple, something affordable, Melissa would brush it off. "We can't have that," she'd say. "It'll look cheap." One day, Daniel came over for dinner looking a bit troubled. I could tell something was off, so I asked. He sighed and said, "Mom, it's about Melissa's parents." Apparently, Melissa didn't want her parents at the wedding. She told Daniel that her parents were embarrassing and trashy. She said they didn't fit in with her new life, that her mother was loud and her father was a mechanic who smelled like oil. I remember sitting there, stunned. "Daniel," I said, "everyone deserves to have their parents at their wedding, even if they're not perfect." But Melissa had told him they were better off not coming. She said they'd ruin the atmosphere. Something about that didn't sit right with me. I asked Daniel if he'd ever met her parents. He said no. Melissa told him they were private people and didn't like visitors. My gut told me something was wrong. A few weeks later, Melissa and Daniel came over to discuss the guest list. Melissa was polite but distant with me, as always. She talked to me like she was hosting a corporate meeting, not joining a family. When I asked again about her parents, she snapped, "They're not coming, Margaret. It's better this way. You wouldn't understand." But I did understand, or at least I wanted to. The more she pushed the subject away, the more curious I became. Fast forward to a month before the wedding. I was out shopping for a gift when I ran into an older couple at a small cafe. They looked at me for a moment, then the woman said, "Excuse me, are you Daniel's mother?" I nodded, a bit surprised. She smiled nervously. "We're Melissa's parents, Kathy and Rick." I froze. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. They looked kind. Her mother had warm eyes, and her father had grease-stained hands that looked like they'd seen years of hard work. They didn't seem trashy at all, just ordinary, decent people. Kathy explained they hadn't heard anything about the wedding. Not a word. They found out from a distant cousin who saw the wedding announcement online. Melissa had told them the date wasn't set yet, that it was still up in the air. They looked hurt. Kathy's eyes welled up. "We thought maybe she changed her mind about inviting us. We didn't want to make things worse for her." That was when I realized what Melissa had done. She wasn't protecting herself from embarrassment, she was erasing them. I felt sick to my stomach. After that meeting, I went home and thought long and hard. Part of me wanted to stay out of it. It wasn't my wedding, after all. But the other part, the mother in me, couldn't stand to see another set of parents treated that way. So I made a decision. I invited them. I told Kathy and Rick that they were welcome, not just welcome, but wanted. I said they deserved to see their daughter get married, no matter what Melissa thought. They were hesitant at first, but eventually they agreed. I told them I'd make sure they were seated respectfully and treated with kindness. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't want him caught in the middle. The wedding day came. It was held at a beautiful vineyard just outside the city. Everything was immaculate, the kind of place you see in magazines. Melissa looked stunning in her designer gown, and Daniel looked like the happiest man alive. As the guests arrived, I kept glancing toward the back entrance. Finally, I saw them, Kathy and Rick, walking in quietly. They dressed nicely, though you could tell they weren't used to fancy events. Rick wore a slightly worn suit, and Kathy had done her own hair, but she looked lovely. I guided them to their seats in the back row. Everything was going smoothly until Melissa saw them. Her smile froze. Her face went pale. She walked down the aisle gracefully, but when her eyes locked onto her parents, she faltered for just a second. Most people probably didn't notice, but I did. The ceremony went on, and Melissa held it together. But once the reception began, she found me. She pulled me aside and hissed, "Why are they here?" I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Because they deserve to see their daughter get married." Her voice trembled. "You had no right." "Maybe not," I said, "but lying to your fiancé and abandoning your parents isn't right either." She glared at me, furious. "You don't understand." There, before she could finish, Daniel walked up. He looked confused. "What's going on?" Melissa opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, her father approached. "Sweetheart," Rick said softly, "we didn't mean to cause any trouble. We just wanted to see you happy." You could feel the entire room quiet down. Guests were watching. The band stopped playing. Melissa looked mortified. She tried to turn away, but her mother reached out and took her hand. "Honey," Kathy said gently, "we're proud of you. You don't have to be ashamed of us." Daniel looked between them, completely bewildered. "Melissa," he said slowly, "you told me they didn't want to come." Her face crumbled. She looked cornered like a trapped animal. I thought it would be better this way," she stammered. "You wouldn't understand. They're not like us." Daniel shook his head. "Melissa, they're your parents. I asked you about them so many times." Her father stepped forward. "We might not have much, son, but we love her. We worked our whole lives for her. We wanted her to have the life we never did." There was a long silence. You could hear the wind outside and the faint hum of guests whispering. Finally, Daniel said quietly, "Then you should have been here from the start." Melissa burst into tears. She ran off toward the restroom, her friends following her. I stood there, heart pounding, unsure what to do next. But then something unexpected happened. Rick and Kathy sat down at one of the tables, looking out of place and embarrassed. A few guests, kind souls, began talking to them. Daniel walked over and joined them, asking questions about Melissa's childhood, their home, their lives. They talked for almost an hour. Daniel laughed a few times, and I could see the warmth growing between them. When Melissa finally returned, her makeup smudged but her eyes softer. She saw her husband and her parents really talking. She stood there quietly for a moment, then slowly walked over. Her mother reached out again, and this time Melissa didn't pull away. She whispered something I couldn't hear what, and they both started crying. The tension that had gripped the room began to melt. Later that night, Daniel came up to me. "Mom," he said quietly, "you invited them, didn't you?" I hesitated. "Yes, I did." He smiled sadly. "Thank you. I think you saved something tonight." After that, the evening took a turn for the better. The band played soft music again. Melissa danced with her father, tears streaming down her face. Guests clapped and smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. That night, I realized something powerful, that no amount of status or money or pretense can replace family. Melissa grew up poor, yes, but she grew up loved. Somewhere along the way, she started believing that her past was something to hide, not something to honor. In the days after the wedding, Daniel told me that Melissa apologized deeply to her parents. They started visiting her and Daniel regularly. Slowly, they began rebuilding a relationship. Melissa even told me later that she felt ashamed of how she'd acted. She said, "I thought if I kept them away, I could keep my new life separate, but I just felt emptier." It wasn't an easy journey, but it was an honest one. Sometimes people lie not because they hate others, but because they hate the parts of themselves they think others won't accept. Melissa's lie wasn't about cruelty. It was about fear of being seen for who she was, but the truth has a way of showing up even when you try to silence it. In the end, her parents didn't ruin the wedding, they completed it. A few months later, Melissa and Daniel invited both families over for dinner. It was the first time we'd all been together in a comfortable setting. Kathy brought her famous casserole, and Rick helped Daniel fix a wobbly kitchen chair before dinner. Melissa seemed more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. At one point, she turned to me and said, "You know, I used to think you hated me for being different, but I see now that you just wanted Daniel and me to be honest." I smiled. "Honesty's a good start," I told her. "It's what families are built on." She nodded quietly. Since then, things have been better. Not perfect, but better. Melissa's parents come to birthdays, holidays, and Sunday barbecues. They're humble people, genuine, kind, and grateful. And every time I see them with Melissa, I'm reminded of that day at the cafe, how close she came to losing them completely. I never told her exactly how I found them. She probably guessed, but she never asked. Some things don't need to be said. What matters is that a lie that once separated a daughter from her parents ended up bringing them closer in the end. If there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that love built on lies always collapses. But love built on truth, even when it hurts, always finds a way to stand again. So, to anyone listening who might be hiding part of themselves because they think it makes them unworthy, please don't. You're not your background, you're not your mistakes, and you're not the things you're afraid people will see, because the people who really love you, they'll love you through it. Soft music swells again, that's today's story. Thank you for watching The Silent Truth, where every story has something to teach us about life, about choices, and about the hidden strength it takes to do what's right. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And as always, stay true, stay kind, and never be afraid of the truth, even when it's silent.